look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Well, hello again. Good to be with you here. Episode number 22. What a nice mid-July week, right? Hot and humid and some scattered downpours. Man, we've had some heavy rain over the last couple of days in isolated areas, but it is good to be with you here. And another good podcast here. We're going to be talking about kind of my journey here into the world of weather. We started that kind of last week. We'll continue on that trend here for the day today, and we'll talk about that here in just a bit. I do want to get to some of our weather headlines here. Locally first, you know, it was actually a pretty quiet week since the last time we talked, coming off the holiday. It's been kind of standard mid-July weather, right? Numbers averaging into the mid-80s. We've had a couple of cooler days, but still upper 70s, I think, over the weekend. Did have some pretty crazy downpours in some spots, especially over the weekend. Saturday, I know at my house, we had some pretty heavy rain Saturday night. I know some areas Sunday afternoon picked up on some heavy rain as well. And we've just kind of continued with the daily rain chances here. We're recording this on Tuesday, the 13th. This will be dropping on the 14th, but Monday and Tuesday both provided some scattered downpours across the area. So, you know, it's interesting. Precip-wise, dating back to June 1st in Indianapolis, we are almost at a foot of rain. Let me repeat that. Officially 11.91 inches of rainfall. Now, again, this is stopping on the 12th. And we're forecasting more rain here later this afternoon on the 13th. So we could add to that total here. But so far now, you factor in that time frame, June 1st to July 12th, we're just shy of a foot of rain. It is the fifth wettest of that time period. That's significant. June is now our wettest month here in Indianapolis. July is not, though. It goes June to May. And but July is also a pretty wet month as we roll through the heart of the summer. But it's interesting because it seems like the last few years, July and August has kind of trended a little dry. And we often would be talking about kind of a drought building a little bit. That's not really the case this year. Now, it's been kind of feast or famine because the entire state is not soaked in rain. It's been very isolated, right, with some of these downpours. Case in point, Sunday and Monday, areas north of I-70 picked up anywhere between 2 to as high as 7 inches total of rain. And so there was some flash flooding issues when I woke up this morning when I'm recording this. There were some issues up in Clinton County. I know up in Carroll County, there were some issues as well with some high water. Tippecanoe County near Lafayette picked up a lot of rain as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's just been kind of, but that's what you expect in the summertime, right? You expect these heavy downpours, but they're not widespread. This time of year, if you're going to end up getting widespread heavy rain, it's usually going to be coming from a tropical system, which just hasn't kind of mixed into our weather pattern as of late here in the Midwest. But it is still early. Speaking of, that kind of transitions to the national headlines here. We had Elsa that made landfall and really kind of made headlines for about a week in the lower 48 states, obviously kind of clipping the Gulf Coast of Florida, went from the Keys to the Gulf Coast, made landfall, and then kind of started skirting through Georgia and the Carolinas into Virginia. And then it actually created some big time problems in New England. There was reports of tornadoes. There was reports of flooding. Saw some video of flooding in the subway in New York City. I have some Facebook friends that we met on our honeymoon almost 10 years ago, and they lived just outside of the Boston area, and they had a flooded basement. So there were some flooding issues with Elsa all up and down basically the East Coast. So that caused problems. It did not hit as a hurricane in the United States, but boy, did it create some big issues. So now the eyes are back out toward the Atlantic. This is the time of year when you start kind of seeing more significant waves coming off the coast of Africa, and those are the ones that you watch. But right now, you've got a lot of wind shear that's kind of would be shredding any of these storms apart. And there's a lot of dry air. There's some Saharan dust. We talked a lot about that last year, that there was a pretty good wave of Saharan dust that made it all the way to the United States. Well, it's there again, and maybe not as strong, but anytime you're getting that kind of strong flow of Saharan dust, that helps to dry out the atmosphere, which is not favorable for tropical development off the coast of Africa. So as of right now, all is quiet in the tropics. So that will obviously change at some point, as it always does. But it looks like we'll get at least a quiet stretch for this week and possibly into the following week as well, in terms of tropical weather. Nationally speaking, the big stories have really been what's going on out west right now. Wildfires continue to just really impact the West Coast, mainly in the Pacific Northwest is where you're running into big problems here. And of course, they've had record-breaking heat to add to that. They're exceptionally dry. The National Interagency Fire Center reporting as of Tuesday morning, 59 active large fires across the nation, with a vast majority of those raging in the West. Idaho, Arizona, Montana have the most active wildfires per state as of Tuesday morning. This comes from AccuWeather.com. Two of the largest fires in terms of acreage burned are charring land in northeastern California and southern Oregon. So you are getting in that northwest area. The Beckworth Complex and Bootleg Fire, respectively. Both of these blazes have prompted an evacuation of thousands of residents in nearby towns, destroyed dozens of homes and outbuildings, according to the Associated Press. And then to make matters worse, the extensive amount of smoke being emitted by all the blazes is affecting areas well outside the reach of the fires. Again, according to AccuWeather.com, you're talking about pretty thick smoke from Oregon to Idaho to Nevada to Utah, all the way to Denver, Wyoming, and Montana. So you're talking about cities like Salt Lake City, Boise, Casper, Billings, Denver even has some very low air quality because of the smoke from some of these fires that are raging right now. And then to add insult to injury, where you have those fires, you've got high pressure overhead. Temperatures are running 10 to 20 degrees above average in the western part of the country. So it's nasty there. However, there is some good news, at least for parts of those areas. The monsoon season for the Four Corners region starting to pick up some steam following days of unseasonably hot conditions and dry weather. A more widespread portion of the Southwest is experiencing an uptick in thunderstorm activity this week. So the monsoon activity will get a bit of a boost in places like Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, southern Nevada, western Colorado. So that's good. Beneficial rain heading their way. Many of those areas are drought-stricken right now. Places like Albuquerque, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, well below average from the time period of October 1st of last year to now. They've only picked up just shy of 6 inches in that time frame, where they should be over 14 and a half inches of rainfall. I think the more impressive one number here, Phoenix, Arizona, Salt Lake City, all below average, but San Francisco really in a big deficit. Since that time frame, October 1st of 2020 to now, 7.25 inches of rainfall. They should be averaging closer to 20 inches, almost 20 and a half inches in that time frame. So very, very dry. So it's a welcome sight that they are starting to see some more substantial and beneficial rain in those areas. Those are the headlines here for the week of July 12th of 2021. Pretty quiet here in central Indiana. And what's also interesting, no major severe weather outside of kind of what happened with Elsa moving through. It's been pretty quiet across much of the country. Let's hope it stays that way. All right, coming up, we're going to talk more about my journey, and really I want to focus on kind of college and maybe my early years in TV. And this is where I'm going to talk and spend more time about my love for meteorology. I kind of talked about kind of my love for broadcasting and how I got into it with radio and taking advantage of some of the opportunities that were presented to me and kind of jumping on board with radio and then diving into weather broadcasting. Now I'm going to talk about kind of the science aspect of it and really kind of where my love intensified for this subject matter, which is meteorology. So we're going to talk more about that. That is coming up next here on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Welcome back to Weather Weekly. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey from Wish TV in Indianapolis, Indiana, episode number 22. It's good to be with you here as we're rolling through the middle of July. And then we've kind of talked, we're carrying over the conversation that we had last week, just a little bit about my journey, and I kind of broken it into parts here, hopefully to use as kind of a guide on mainly what not to do, but thinking of maybe some ways that you, as you're going, I know a lot of college kids that have reached out to me listening to this podcast are kind of going through the process that I'm going to talk about today of, going through school and trying to find people to follow and internships and gearing up for that, initial job search. Hopefully I can pass on some knowledge. A lot has changed in 15 years since I kind of went through that process. But hopefully I can give a little bit of advice here for some. Before we kind of get in deep with it, I talked last week, first for my love for radio, secondly for my love of the Weather Channel. And I was going to share this, and I totally forgot. There is an excellent website, and this will, I'm sure, really put me on the nerd scale for many of you, but there is a great website out there. I don't know. I can't pronounce the actual name of it. But it's WeatherStar 4000 is what you can search for, I believe. Let me make sure I type that in right. I have it bookmarked. So WeatherStar 4000. If you are it's okay. It's the third one. Well, it's the second one down. WeatherStar 4000 Plus. All right. So it's a web-based weather simulator. And what it simulates is the old school local on the 8s. So let me, I'm going to throw the music up here. You hear that? Yeah, that's some good stuff right there, right? Good elevator music. So what I'm seeing right now, it's got the travel forecast for Tuesday. It's scrolling that along. I know there's no visuals here on a podcast. It's like radio. But I can also put on the text. Now, it's not the voice guy from the original Weather Channel.
Travel forecast for Tuesday for the following cities. Atlanta.
Now she's going to go through all of them. I really don't want to hear all of them here. But
Regional forecast for Tuesday for the following cities. Cleveland, chance showers, then storms likely with a high of 82. Indianapolis, chance storms, then showers likely with a high of 80. Street Louis, decreasing clouds with a high of
Street
85.
Louis. Well, see, it's not the same without the computer voice, but you get the picture here. But what's great about this is, I'm going to fade this out. It runs on a loop, and sometimes I'll just have this chilling on at home. Man, it brings back some good memories from the old school Weather Channel days. It even has kind of the scrolling bar at the bottom. It's got the current conditions under that. And then I believe it will, I've not looked when it actually does, but I believe it will scroll warnings, watches and warnings. And I know that you can put your own text, because you remember how they would have like advertisements kind of at the bottom. So you can put your own text on the bottom. You just kind of have like your own little weather channel. And they've got the classic look, the old school classic look with kind of that orange-ish to fade to blue background kind of gradient, and then the blue box with the text. And it's got the running clock. It'll even show the radar. It's updated. I mean, it's got all the info like that they just pulled from the Weather Service. So anyway, check it out if you're a big Weather Channel nerd. Check out Weather Star 4000 Plus. It'll take you to a page, and then you can put in your zip code or your town. You can put any town in the country, and it'll show up there. So there you go. It's a little time killer, something cool, whatever. I mean, I don't know if you're going to spend like hours playing with it, but it's just kind of fun. It's nostalgic, I believe, is what they would say. So anyway, so last week, last podcast, I spent a lot of my time kind of talking about my high school years and kind of gearing into college, and basically the radio side and how I kind of got introduced into broadcasting a little bit. Didn't know much about broadcasting. And radio really kind of changed that for me, because I started learning kind of all of the aspects. You know, I started behind the scenes, basically just, turning the dials, hitting some buttons, putting people on the air, putting them off, and airing commercials, that kind of stuff. But that kind of paved the way for my interest just in broadcast in general, to then getting on air by the end of time of my radio, and then, moving on once I graduated college. So I spent my entire college career at Ball State University. I will just put out full disclosure that I was not a very good student coming into Ball State at all. In fact, I didn't spend my freshman year at Ball State. I actually went to the community college to get into Ball State. So, I finally kind of turned it on a little bit once we got going into college. But, I was always a big sports nerd and all that kind of stuff. Well, really, when I started getting into my meteorology classes, that's what ended up sparking kind of the interest for me. So, bottom line, always take school seriously from, elementary school on, because sports aren't going to be there for now. I'm a 40-year-old man. I can play golf, but I think I played my last round of full court basketball within the last year. Just, man, it takes its toll after a while. And yes, it's good to enjoy the sports while you have them there, but unless you're an exceptional athlete, which any of you that know me personally, or if you watch on TV, you can probably tell from my physique that I am not gifted with supreme athletic ability. That was something I probably should not have put on a high priority list for myself. But nonetheless, it ended up working out. So I spent my time at Ball State a little bit longer than what I probably should have. Was there for 5 years. Some of that was just having to retake some classes that I did not do as well as I should have my freshman year because I wasn't taking quite as seriously as what I should have and thought that college was going to be easy, and it was not. But we got it turned around, and I'll tell you what, my love for meteorology, although I had kind of a generic love, just appreciation like anybody else. Weather impacts all of us, but I had probably a more unusual fascination with it than most people. But one person is directly responsible for my love and understanding of meteorology, and his name is Dr. David Arnold. He was my meteorology professor at Ball State all of the years that I was there. I didn't end up having him for a class until probably my sophomore year. So my freshman year, it was kind of like basic meteorology. I had a great 101 professor in Dr. Schwartz. He's no longer at Ball State, but he was a great meteorology professor that I had. And you have to keep in mind now Ball State's a little bit different. They've separated the meteorology degree. Back when I was there, it still is part of the geography department, but it wasn't a separate degree. My degree says geography, and they had 4 options. Option number 4 was meteorology and climatology, which is the one I went through. So I had to take a lot of geography classes. Carol Shears, who recently retired from Ball State, also loved her classes. I think I had her for 150 class. Sorry, Geography 150. I may have had her for another one as well. Those were 3 of my, and then I'll mention Petra Zimmerman, who did not come until my senior year of Ball State, and I got only for 1 class. She was in my climatology class. Those were kind of the 4 main professors that I had that I will always remember that played a huge role and influence in my love for meteorology. But hands down, Doc is top of the list. That's what we called him, Doc, Dr. Arnold. He used to, and I don't have his official bio up. I guess I should have. But I mean, I spent a lot of time with him, especially and I talked about this in a previous podcast on my storm chase trip, which was kind of like that was the peak of really creating this, fever pitch of this love for meteorology. Was that I spent a lot of time with Doc on that trip and just learning about his life. He worked, for the National Weather Service for some years, and then he got into teaching. He bounced around all over the country. He spent a lot of time at Mississippi State helping to build up that program, which is now a beast of a program when it comes to churning out broadcast meteorologists. I know several off the top of my head. I got to work with one of them when I was in Peoria, but there are literally hundreds of them now across the country. They're probably rival the likes of Penn State, who also has an excellent broadcast meteorology school. So we were very lucky to have Doc be a part of Ball State, and I was extremely lucky to have him there during my time at Ball State up in Muncie. It's interesting. So when I was, thinking about college, and I was pretty certain I was going to go to Ball State. I grew up a big IU basketball fan, but at the time, IU didn't have much of a meteorology program. Purdue has a very good meteorology program, but they didn't have a real good basis with television at that point. That has changed. But at least at that point, when I was getting ready to go to school, it was more research driven. It still is. But both of those schools now you can get through and have a basic understanding of television and with some meteorology involved. Ball State kind of offered the best of both worlds. It had an exceptional telecommunications school, and it had a growing meteorology department. So my senior year, I just sent a letter for you kids that don't know. We didn't always just email and get an immediate response. I actually sent a letter to Dr. Arnold and just asking more about the department. And I got actually a response within a couple of weeks, I believe, and it was sent to me with multiple papers, information about the major, the different tracks that you could take. There was obviously a track that if you wanted to go just work solely for research or for the government, the National Weather Service, that's one thing. If you want to jump on for broadcast meteorology, that was a different track, and a suggestion that you minor in telecommunications. So lots of good info. We had a whole sheet on the storm chase trip, which seemed, when I'm a senior in high school, it said in the paper most people that go on the trip are juniors and seniors, and that seemed like a million years away from me. So I was like, wow, that sounds really awesome, but that's a long ways away. So, but I got a great info from Doc right out of the gate, and I was pretty much sold. I'm like, that's it. So we're going to go to Ball State, and we did that, majored in meteorology, minored in telecommunications, didn't really get started in my TCOM stuff until really into my sophomore and more so my junior and senior year, since it was a minor. Had to knock all the gen ed stuff, and that's where I kind of ran into trouble when I started off with school, the gen ed stuff, because it was a bunch of stuff that, and I know I wouldn't say this to my kids. I'm sure maybe they'll listen to this 10 years from now, since it lives on the internet forever. There was just some subject matters that I just did not care about that much. Anthropology was one of them. And they were interesting, but it wasn't my passion, right? You go to school, you go to college specifically because you can check off majors and stuff like that. And while it's interesting to learn other stuff, I was there to learn about my field and be done and get a job. So, and that was my attitude anyway. Not a good attitude to have. I learned my lesson after not doing well in a few of those classes that I just wasn't really interested in, but they were required. We took them, we got back on course. So I think, I'm certainly not the only college student that is an issue with. It's a new world when you're in college. You don't have your parents there to kind of make sure you're doing your homework and studying and doing the right things and all that stuff. You're on your own. You do a lot of growing in college. I certainly did do a lot of growing in college. Wouldn't take back any of the mistakes that I made in college, because they all kind of helped pave who I am today, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But if I wouldn't have had any of those experiences and learning on my own, then, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I really enjoyed my meteorology classes, especially the ones with Doc, because once I got out of 101 with Dr. Schwartz, and Dr. Schwartz was great. What I loved about Dr. Schwartz's classes, we'd begin every day kind of just going through current conditions and kind of doing a brief forecast. It really kind of familiarized ourselves with kind of the workflow of what I go through now. And you have to remember, this was 15 years ago. So we're back in 2000. The internet becoming more accessible to a large majority of the U.S. population was really in its infancy, right? I know the internet had been around for a decade or so, but it really was starting to become more widespread and user-friendly for a lot of households. A lot of people now were starting to get internet. I mean, I think at this point, we're just now, cable systems were now starting to, get internet, through Comcast or Xfinity or whatever. So internet speeds were becoming fast and easily available, as long as you lived in a decent sized town. And Muncie is a decent sized town, is a college town. So that was kind of a good way to kind of pave how I go about my business every morning, getting my forecast done. And then we jumped into other branches of kind of this major in meteorology, where, we're focusing on dynamic storms and forecasting and all that other stuff. And it's interesting. Now I've kind of I've changed it a little bit to how it caters to my forecast, but I still have my bookmarks that basically Dr. Arnold had created, and I think all of us students asked from him from the first class, and I cannot remember for the life of me. It was a 200 level course, what that first course was with Doc. But I do remember that he put together binders for us. Like those of you that are college students, or if you've been through the college experience, you know that you have to spend a ridiculous amount of money on textbooks. And then you usually don't get jack squat for them back when you sell them back, right? Now, Doc did require for us to get textbooks, but he also did us a huge solid, and he had, they're super thick, his own textbook basically, and they were notes of everything that he went through the entire class. I think I have every single one of those for every class that I have. Now, do I go back and reference them much? No, I should, because, man, there's a lot of good information there. Unfortunately, when you're in broadcast meteorology, 90% of the stuff that we really go through doesn't really apply. It does in your head a little bit in terms of forecasting, but there's no way that any news director is going to let me say a lot of the stuff that we learned in any of those upper level meteorology courses, because the viewer is going to be just right. And that is the last thing that we want, is for the viewer to fall asleep. We have a very short amount of time to get out a very coherent forecast, and we want people to come back for that. So you've got to keep it simple. And so we don't get to be weather nerdy, if you will. Now, there are exceptions to that, which I'll talk about later, maybe when I talk about kind of my broadcast meteorology career. But, man, Doc just kind of laid it out very simple for you. His courses were tough. You couldn't miss a class of his. You could not, because I think most of my classes that I had with Doc were Tuesday, Thursday classes. That means you only met twice a week. 1 week would be his lesson, Tuesday would be like the lesson, Thursday would be the quiz, and then we'd start on a new lesson, and that would carry over into the next Tuesday. So if you missed any of those days, you're either missing a large portion of a lesson plan that you will take a quiz for in 2 days, or you're missing a quiz. Now, exams took up a big part of the grade, but man, those quizzes could make or break your grade if you missed a bunch of them. So you couldn't miss any of those days. But I equate meteorology classes, at least with Doc, and the way he taught it, to math. If you missed much of math, you were completely lost, right? You remember in high school when you were taking geometry, if you were out for a week and then you came back, you were just lost. They're already on all these theorems and all this other stuff, and you're like, what in the world? You would get super behind, or even with trig or algebra, even calculus. You miss some time, you're in trouble. Meteorology is a little bit that way. It's hard to play catch up with some of the stuff. So, man, that was the utmost important thing, is do not miss class, especially for Doc, because you'll pay for it in the end. I don't know if he purposely built it that way or not. I mean, obviously his job is to teach us students, but he just packed in so much good information every class. But I also love Doc's class because he would start off many of our classes kind of going through significant weather around the country. We talk about the SPC outlooks, and if there was a significant severe weather forecast event anywhere in the country, he'd kind of walk us through it. Why is this forecasted this way? If we were out chasing, where would we want to go? We would spend a lot of time doing that in the late spring, especially right before, the second semester kind of wrapped up. But we do a lot of fun forecasting for the winter. It was challenging. It was great. And Doc is probably the biggest reason why I hung with college and stayed passionate about it as long as I did. Those of you that have gone through the college experience, when you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, when you start being able to submit your application for graduation, at least this is how it was for me, man. I had checked out. I was at the point where I'm like, all right, what boxes do I need to check to just be done? And it was probably, it was intensified for me because I grew up in Muncie. So I spent 18 years in Muncie, with the exception of a couple. I lived down in Indianapolis. So 16 out of 18 years through kind of, your grade school. And then I went to college in Muncie. So I had never really moved away. I was ready to go. I was ready to go. No disrespect to Ball State. I love my alma mater so much. Love everything about Ball State. Love what Ball State has done for me in my career, and love the outreach that they've given me since I moved back to Indianapolis, over 6 years ago. And working at Wish TV, and through their alumni program, I've had great visits back in the last 6 years. But it was time for me to get out of there. But Doc kind of helped press me through. Listen, the 400 level classes were a beast. They were tough. And they're meant to be tough, right? These were to prepare all of us to go into forecasting, whether it was the weather service or whether it was broadcast. We needed to be able to comprehend some pretty difficult things when it comes to forecasting, and he pressed us hard on that. That was also when I had Petra Zimmerman for a climatology class. Loved her class. I wish I would have had more with Petra. She was great, Dr. Zimmerman. And I've been very blessed to be able to work with her over the last several years whenever we've had interns from Ball State coming here. Now, that said, some mistakes that I made, but I was very lucky to get by not doing it. Now, I was working a couple of jobs on top of going to school full time, taking a full load of courses, right? 15 hours, I think, is the full, or maybe it's 12. I think it's 15. I was working at the radio stations, which I mentioned in my past podcast. I was also working waiting tables at a Texas Roadhouse in Muncie. Still exists. I think it's in a different building now, but it's still there. Good money, good food, ate a lot. But, I was living in an apartment off campus with my best friends. So I had lots of bills that needed to be paid. And, you're trying to balance all of that, all kind of together. So, it was a grind to try to get through my senior year. So if it wouldn't have been for people like Doc that made meteorology super interesting, and and Dr. Zimmerman, who made that climatology class super interesting. It would have been very difficult to try to kind of press during that last year and a half, basically, of trying to wrap up the meteorology side of things. But we got there, and barely, but we got there. And then the TCOM side of things was good too, in a different avenue. It wasn't what I expected. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've been working in commercial radio at that point, when I started taking TCOM classes, it was my junior year, so I'd already been working in commercial radio for 3 years. So, of course, as a 21-year-old, I think I know everything, and I'm thinking I can walk right through there and be like, psh, this is easy. Come on, I've already been doing this. I'm working in TCOM right now. It was not easy. I went through some pretty difficult TCOM classes. Jim Culbertson was a guy. I think I had to write a movie script for one of his classes. That was rough. I had some of the other professors that I had. Tom Chester was one. I don't know if he's still at Ball State, but I had him for. It's interesting. Tom Chester was also a coworker of mine previously, and then ended up being at the radio station. But then he ended up working in a class at Ball State where we had to write commercial radio copy, and then we had to voice it and kind of make it sellable. Now, I did have a little bit of experience with that, so that helped, but it gave me a new kind of fresh appreciation for what the people that worked full-time at the radio station I worked at did for a living. So that was great. I had Mike Spillman for TCOM Law. That was probably one of the harder classes that I had, but also more interesting classes, some stuff I just didn't think about when it came to law stuff, legal stuff. When it comes to TCOM, and there is a lot. When it comes down to it, I'm glad I don't have to deal with a lot of those kind of things. That's management things now in our industry. I had Stan Sollers for a radio class. Stan was great, but he was tough. He graded tough and fair. But again, that was one of those classes that I probably came in there puffing my chest a little bit and like, oh, I've been doing radio for a while, so what are you going to teach me? And Stan was great. Kind of really helped me to think about thinking outside the box when you're doing news reports and stuff like that. Specifically for radio, it was an audio based, but to that point, it was me getting on the mic, getting a sound bite, reading to that sound bite, and then having what we call a tag. So basically, kind of like what they do in news for television. You'd have like a read, whether it be over video, what we call VO, or whether you're on set and you're reading it. And then you'd have a sound bite from an interview, what we call a SOT, stands for sound on tape, which we don't use tape anymore, but that's just been the old industry standard. We call it a SOT. And then you'd have a tag that would kind of wrap up the story, basically. But Stan kind of wanted to be more featurey, adding sound effects to some of your news stories and stuff like that, which I never really thought about doing when it comes to radio. And that helped me out a lot when I went to Indianapolis and worked for WXNT, because there was a few news stories that I did. I think one out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There was a few others where I would get some what we call nat sounds, natural sounds that you would add kind of in the background of your story. So Stan was great in the TCOM department. He's still there. And one last one, Tim Underhill. I had him for one class, and man, was it tough. And Tim is great. Tim specialized in photog work, camera work, and it is something I probably could never do to the artistry of the really good ones. And I've worked with some really good. I work with some really good ones here at Wish TV. Tim is a really good one. He's won lots of awards. I've had thanks to him, I can at least do the basic stuff, because of my first job in Lima, Ohio, I actually ended up having to go out on Friday nights and shoot football games and basketball games because it was a small mom and pop station and everybody basically just helped everybody. And if it wouldn't been for Tim, I probably wouldn't have been that great. It would have been like, my dad doing home movies when I'm playing T-ball. A very shaky camera, not knowing where to focus, not knowing where to keep, my shot on during highlights and that kind of stuff. So thanks to him, I was able to kind of guide my way through that whole thing. So those were some of the best and most influential people. And I guess I've come to realize that the last 2 weeks of my podcast have more kind of become a thank you. I mean, hopefully you're learning kind of a little bit and learning about along the way on what I did and why it is who I am, basically. But it's also a big thank you, which I guess I've never had the opportunity to do on a public stage, to thank the people that have gotten me to the point that I'm at 15 years in the making, or later, I should say. So it is a huge thank you because without all of the people that I mentioned, whether it's in this podcast or last week's podcast, I would not be where I am today without any of those people being at least even a small part of my life. So if any of them are listening or if you know them, tell them I said thank you, because it means a lot. So college, again, it was kind of standard. I think I got better and better as I went on through college because I became more passionate. Something that clicked in me that I was a very late bloomer on was, and another thank you goes out to my mom. My mom was a single mother, raised my sister and I, and she always wanted us to make sure we had a focused goal and to make sure that we do everything we can to achieve that goal. Mom had goals for us, which was to graduate from college. It was something that her and my dad, neither one of them did, and she regretted that. So did my dad. And she made it a priority to stress the importance of finishing college. So even though I was never really the best student, I had some good years at Ball State, and I think those were probably my best years as a student. When you factor in any high school or middle school or even elementary school, there was the heart of college, and even up to my senior year, even though I may have kind of played it off a little bit, I still was a pretty decent student. I really kicked it into gear, and a lot of it was, yes, I was goal-oriented, but the other was the fear of not wanting to let my mother down, who had done a lot for us, growing up as a single mom. And, the thought of failing and not graduating and not pursuing what I wanted, which was becoming a television meteorologist. It was something that I was pretty certain I wanted to do since middle school. The thought of letting her down was probably the worst thing, but it was also the biggest driving motivator for me at that time. And that was something I needed. I desperately needed a motivator to get me through. And I did. But it just kind of build up from there. So if there is a motivator, maybe it's your parents, maybe it's a friend, use that. Use that. My sister did the same thing. We went in completely different directions. She's an attorney, but about the same age from middle school on, my sister desperately wanted to be an attorney, and she was able to complete that goal. Now, she may tell you that her driving motivation was a little bit different, but whatever works. Whatever works. It could have been a competition with her older brother, right? That she saw that I was getting through school and I got the job that I wanted finally. Maybe she was like, I need to do that. I need to do better than him, which, hey, that's fine as long as you keep it healthy. But, use that motivation. That was the driving force for me. And that fire never really burned out, even when I got my first job, which I'll talk about this and then I'll stop and we'll get deeper into my career. But I want to talk about the process that it took to get into this field. And I was told by Paul Poteet, I was told by many of my professors at Ball State that were in the TCOM department and had worked in television. And I guess I shouldn't skip over this because this was a very important influencer. And I think it'll be a good segue into what I'm going to talk about applying for a job. But Newslink, Indiana. My goodness, I would not be where I am without Newslink, Indiana, which was the student-run newscast at Ball State. We did that at 9 o'clock. I think it was called Newsweek at 9. It was 9 o'clock. We did that at 9 o'clock, and I think my night was on Tuesday or Thursdays. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I did not get into the game until really late. And this is another tip I would recommend for anybody getting ready to go into college, or maybe you're young in college. Find out anything and everything that your college has to offer in terms of those kind of extracurricular activities. I did not know just the magnitude of what Ball State had in terms of that student-run newscast. I knew that they had a newscast, but I did not know how closely it mimicked an actual commercial television newscast, meaning they had the equipment. For me, specifically, they had WSI, which is a vendor that's still around today. I've used before, that TV stations used back then. And so we were actually, at that time, I want to say Channel 6 had the same system that we did. And so, man, that puts you up a leg up on a lot of colleges that don't do that. A lot of them are now, but back then, some of the student-run newscasts, it was PowerPoint presentations. But to go back, I didn't know. And a big reason why I didn't know is I didn't think to ask. What I thought we ran at Ball State was probably equal to what we did for student announcements in high school, right? You've got a camcorder, you've got some cheapo, similar to PowerPoint equipment that you could put over your voice while you're reading news stories. You do a weather forecast with some cheap graphics that you probably downloaded off the Weather Channel, and you put them in there, and then that was it, right? No, not at all. This was a legit newscast that went for a half an hour, had commercials and everything. It went in order. They had an A block with breaking news. You had like a first weather, you had a tease, and then you would go into a full weather, 3 minutes of full weather. All with a crosstalk with your anchors and walk to chroma key and all that. You had an IFB. Yeah, man. I mean, it was like, why did I not get involved with this before? And I did not find out about what kind of program that was until I went on my storm chase trip, which, mind you, was the summer between my junior and senior year. So I was a late bloomer. But I did get in my senior year, tried out, never had experience with television broadcasting, but I think this is where radio paid off for me a little bit, because television weather is all about ad-libbing. We don't read a script. I don't know, I'm sure many of you know that, but some of you may not, that when you see us go up there, we're using the graphics as an aid, right? Kind of like you would a PowerPoint presentation. So we're not completely just talking off the top of our head. We're using those graphics as an aid, and we are putting them together in an order that we believe makes sense. But we are ad-libbing the entire time. There is no script. And that's where I think radio really played in my favor. And so I learned a lot. I think I did fairly well. I mean, my jackets didn't fit. I think there is a video. I'm gonna have to put it digitally sometime, but there is a video of some of my early newscasts that my mom would record because she could actually see them in Muncie. They aired on our PBS station. My suit jacket's like all sorts of, it's like I may as well just laid down in that suit. Didn't take care of it, didn't fit right. But man, what a great experience. And it was interesting to just kind of look from my first broadcast on through my last one in college, and then obviously comparing it to where I'm at now, and how much I've grown. I thought I was really, really good back then. People told me, like, wow, you do a really good job. And I look back on it now, I don't know if I'd hire that kid. I would have been like, okay, first of all, you're saying this word too much. You're saying too much. You are talking too fast. You are moving your arms around. Like, there's so many critiques that I would make for young Marcus. But man, that experience was great. So anyway, going through NewsLink, that was an invaluable tool because I was able to go in and record and save weather forecast, which I am very guilty of to this day, not being very good at saving the good ones. And I didn't think about doing that during my first and second semester doing NewsLink. Because I'm one of those people, and I still unfortunately kind of get in this mindset. I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to be here for the summer. I've got time. I'm not graduating until the end of the summer session anyway. So whatever. Well, here comes summer session, and I still don't have anything saved. And they're not running regular newscasts anymore, obviously, because everybody's gone, except for the Muncie local yokels, as we call them, which would be me. So I had to go in and actually ask somebody to come in special for me because I couldn't pop myself up on air and all this other stuff. So I finally got, a little bit, but I felt pressed and rushed. And I kind of did the same thing right after I graduated from Ball State and I moved down to Indianapolis and started working at WXNT. I contacted Paul, and Paul had never seen me in front of the camera before, except for I think he let me play around my senior year of high school. So I had no experience. So he had zero expectation of this kid being any good. Fast forward to my first year out of college, and I'm trying to get a resume reel put together, and I should probably state this fact. I may have already, but you're going to hear this a lot between now and probably the next podcast when I talk about my journey through TV, is my goal wasn't just to be a meteorologist. My goal was to be a meteorologist in Indianapolis. This was the end goal for me, knowing full well that I'm probably going to have to make 2 stops. At that time, Indianapolis was probably a 2-stop market. And what I mean by that, market 25. Markets are ranked by their size. New York City is 1, LA is 2, Chicago is 3, Houston is 4, so on, so on. So Indy is 25. That means that it's only really experienced people that are in this market. So there's no way I'm going to get a job straight out of college, and there's probably no way that I'm going to get a job 2 years, through my first job, which typically, you sign a 2-year contract and then you move on to your next job. And so that was always the plan. So I knew that, but it was a long-term plan that I knew I was going to have to kind of buckle down, go to a really small market, maybe then go to a medium-sized market, and then make the jump into Indianapolis. So with that being said, it's like I wasn't like in a huge, I was like, I didn't want to leave Indy, but I did want to kind of get things going. I enjoyed the radio job, but it was part-time, so it wasn't paying me squat. I was broke. There was no way I can live off this and raise a family and all this other stuff. So I buckled down. I went to Channel 6 for kind of a day, post-morning newscast, sat with Paul, and he helped me get set up, and he actually did the crosstalk for me. And what ended up being probably a half-hour session was some of the most disastrous on-air stuff that I've probably put down in my life. And I did that in front of my mentor. And that was probably, I've never mentioned that day to Paul, and he may listen to this podcast. That was one of the more humiliating days in my life. It was also one of the most humbling because I came out of college and many of the professors, many of my, the students that I went to school with, my peers, all were like, wow, Marcus, you do a really good job. And, you know, you're going to have no problem finding a job and blah, blah, blah. And so I kind of went in thinking, man, I'm going to walk into Channel 6. Maybe I'll impress somebody. You know, maybe they'll be like, yeah, dude, you're from here. You're already working in radio. We maybe have a spot for you. What I did was completely the opposite. Like, super embarrassing, bad. Maybe it wasn't as bad as what I think about. I don't even think I have. They put it on DVD for me. I don't even think I own it. I think I threw it away. And I wish I wouldn't now because I can look back at it and laugh, but I was mortified. There was nothing that stands out. It was just I couldn't sync the graphics with my voice, and I was nervous, and I let the nerves get to me, which I usually don't, and it just ended up being a disaster. So I had to throw that away and back to square one. I'm back up in Muncie, and I've already been graduated for about 6 months, and I really have not sent much out in terms of resumes. So finally, I get something that I'm proud of up in Muncie. While they're in school, I'm going like on a weekend and just having one of my buddies that was still at Ball State, that was a director, come in and help me out. And I was able to kind of get 2 or 3 different forecasts on there that I could slap on a resume and be content with for a job. So now comes the applying process. I'm already starting off slow. It's been 6 months and I have not sent one application out, not one. Finally get this resume reel built and put together. And back then you had to send VHS tapes. So I had to make copies after copies. That means I had to go back up to Muncie and make multiple copies of a VHS tape to send out. So I did. And there was a website. I still think it exists now. It's called tvjobs.com. And it specifically had TV job openings. And I basically applied to all jobs that were above market like 80. Most of them said you needed like a year or 2 of experience, even like the really high ones. But if it was like well over 100, I applied anyway. I'm like, whatever. What do I have to lose? And never really got any responses at all. There was one news director from Beaumont, Texas, that responded back to me, but then I never heard from him again via email. And so I was like, all right, I don't know if this is going to be my thing. You know, I was like, my tape must be awful or whatever. What's funny is, I kind of just went about my thing and I went hot and heavy for like that first month of sending stuff. And then there was nothing. There wasn't anything popping up. And I kind of just gave up for a while. And then it was maybe another 6 months. I went hot and heavy again with no response. And at that point, I had kind of started believing that this was not going to be a job for me. I was starting to kind of accept that. That's the first time that's ever really popped into my mind. And there was kind of a moment out of desperation and maybe some slight depression of, something that I had dreamed of doing. Look, we've all been there, right? We've all had these dreams and aspirations of something, and then we get older and it isn't reality. And I think I was starting to come to that point, and that hurt because that was something that I was so desperately wanted. And out of pure desperation, I made a resume profile on TV Jobs, which no news director, and I knew this, no news director looked at paper resumes. Nobody. They looked at, they wanted to look at your reel. They wanted to see how you were on air. You can't prove that on a paper resume, but whatever. I posted it. I'm like, maybe somebody will see it and they'll inquire about seeing my resume. Maybe they'll be impressed that I worked in radio. I did a lot of these things, hopefully trying to set myself up to be marketable and attractive to an employer. And lo and behold, it was maybe a month after that. I had completely given up at that point. I was already starting to apply for non-broadcasting jobs. And actually, now I think about it, I was still trying to apply for jobs, but I was looking for radio stuff, and I'm like, maybe I'm just thinking about this all wrong. Maybe I should go and look at a major network like ESPN and do their radio. I've got tons of years of board hopping experience. Why wouldn't I be, someone that I could handle that? I remember being out visiting my dad in Eastern Pennsylvania, and kind of throwing resumes there. And I got back, and it was maybe 2 days later that I got an email from a Kathleen Phipps in Lima, Ohio, and said, "Hey, we have a job opening. I was just curious if you would be interested in coming for an interview and talking to us about our meteorologist position." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "I didn't even send this lady a video." And I immediately emailed back. I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. You kidding me? Let's do this." So I made sure and grabbed a tape, and I set up the interview, and I went out there. I tried to do a little research on this station. There wasn't much on their website, and I couldn't watch any of their videos for their newscasts. So I knew very little about it. I did have I knew about some of the personalities. They had a website that had some of the personalities on it, but I don't think it had all of them. So, and then I did a little bit of research on Lima, Ohio. I wanted to go prepared, wanted to know a little bit about the town, wanted to know about the counties around. So the DMA, I wanted to prove that I could, I knew the area very well. Just trying to do as much as I could to market myself. So the interview day came. My grandma let me drive her brand new Honda Civic because she was not, she did not believe that my broke down 300,000 mile Honda Civic was going to make it to Lima. So I got to drive in class on this fancy new gold Honda Civic and drove it the 2 hours from Muncie to Lima and did my interview. Got to meet with Kathleen and the news director, Jeff Gunter, who I believe is still working in Lima, Ohio. And it was this mom and pop owned TV station. And they had a Fox affiliate, a CBS affiliate, and an ABC affiliate, which I was not familiar with. They didn't do that kind of stuff in Indianapolis. So I didn't know about the duopolies and all this other stuff. Mind you, too, the CBS and the ABC were low-powered stations. So this was a very small run operation. But went through the interview. She asked if I had a tape. I was like, yes, I do. And I gave her the tape. And, they asked kind of, just general questions about my interest in weather. And and all that other stuff. And I handed him my tape and I went about my way and drove the 2 hours back. And I thought I felt pretty good about it. Did not expect anything for a while. I was playing in a band. On Ball State's campus, and there was just kind of some side money. It was two of my best friends. We did it through college, and since we still lived in Indianapolis, we'd come up on Tuesday nights and we'd hang out with some of our old friends that still lived in Muncie, and we'd play in this band on Tuesday night. It's at the Locker Room. It's a bar that doesn't exist anymore off campus in the Village. And, I showed up after my interview back in Muncie, played in the band, and had a good time with friends. Woke up the next morning, went to IHOP with my friends, and got a phone call at 9 a.m. with Kathleen calling me, offering me the job. Didn't offer specifics on money. Hadn't written me up a contract yet, but it offered me the job. And I could not believe how quickly everything had turned around. My first phone call, obviously, was my mom. My second phone call was to Paul Poteet, and he told me not to sign anything yet. And I was like, I haven't even seen the contract yet, but I've just verbally accepted and everything. So that was a cool moment because it was finally like I broke through and got my opportunity. We were always told the hardest thing in the TV business is to get in. Once you're in, it's a little bit easier to move around. And so I felt kind of this weight off my shoulders that, okay, I'm actually doing what I set out to do. Now I've got to take those steps forward to get back home, because now I'm moving away from home for the first time in my life. I'm moving out of state. And that's where I'm going to kind of stop things, because next week, we'll kind of finish things up on talking about my drive to get to Indianapolis and the passion that I had for that. So this was kind of fun, just talking about my walkthrough. Hopefully it wasn't too boring for you. I know it's like a life story, whatever, a memoir. I know it's kind of self-serving, but it's good to go back. Hopefully you learn a little something from it. Hopefully some of the people that I name drop over the last 2 episodes are listening and they understand what an influence they had on my life and my career journey. So next week we'll talk about my journey through Lima and through Peoria, and then eventually back home here in Indianapolis. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll have your week forecast and your 14-day outlook coming up next here on Weather Weekly. Quick look at your weekly forecast here for the week of July 12th. You know what? Pretty quiet here. Very seasonable. There's nothing really major coming down the pipe in terms of temperature changes. Did have some active weather from Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, but some drier weather briefly for Wednesday and Thursday. Most of the day should be dry with highs in the mid-80s. Humidity is still going to be up. Dew points likely in the mid and upper 60s. So it's going to feel a little juicy. Cold front approaching the region by Thursday night will likely bring showers and thunderstorms to our area starting Thursday overnight and then likely into Friday as well. And that will likely also bring some scattered showers and thunderstorms to our region to kick off the weekend on Saturday. It does appear that Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday right now are going to be on the dry end of things, and temperatures may scale back a bit in the wake of that cold front back into the low 80s, and we might dial back the humidity a little bit. The 6 to 10 day outlook right now, not bad. Good chance for below average temperatures. Normal high for mid-July is typically in the mid 80s, and precip below average, which wouldn't be a horrible thing considering some of the areas where we picked up a lot of rain. We could wring out a little bit. A lot of state fairs are going, or county fairs are going on over the next few weeks, so don't want to wash those out. And looks like we might be in hopefully decent shape there. The 8 to 14 day outlook calling for below average temperatures and below average precipitation here for the next couple of weeks. That would take us to the end of July. Man, we are just flying along long. Before you know it, we're going to be talking about fall and all that stuff. So it does also bring to our attention getting ready for fall. That means we'll obviously talking to Mike Ryan about our winter weather outlook. I know I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but Climate Prediction Center did issue a La Nina warning or La Nina watch, rather. The potential for reemergence of La Nina during September-November season lasting through winter. So it could be a La Nina winter. If those of you who have not listened to the podcast with Mike Ryan before, the winter weather forecast that we did last late fall, it was an El Nino year. This could be a La Nina year. That does mean some different aspects. Usually it means a wetter and warmer winter for us in central Indiana, but there's always kinks in the armor, and there's things that can fluctuate that a little bit. So we'll see if that holds true, and we'll talk to Mike much later into the season as we get closer to the fall and he starts working on his winter weather forecast. But I did want to put that out there. That was released this week, that there was a La Nina watch coming up for this winter season. My thanks to you for, again, spending another day with me, just walking you through kind of my journey. I greatly appreciate it, and always appreciate your feedback as well. You can reach me anytime via email, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. You can hit me up on social media as well. Facebook, Marcus Bailey Weather, Instagram and Twitter, search for @MarcusBailey. That'll do it for this week, midweek here for July. Hope to see you and hear you again next time on Weather Weekly. And don't forget to check out all our other great podcasts here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com, and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.